Good day. My name is James Sherry. I am a poet and editor at Roof Books. I've been writing about environmentalism in poetry and essays for many years. Today, the title of my talk is Against One Model Alone. What do you expect we poets are going to say about the environment? Shall we repeat in a charming way the nightly news about eco-disasters or describe its eco-beauties ad nauseum? Will natural pietism, where we love nature and think it does no wrong, introduce an eco-commodity capital wave? Or can poetry change our correspondence with the non-human components of the biosphere, giving us a chance to adapt our culture and ourselves to the new conditions? The human response to environmental issues runs a great risk if it clings to a moral or other single model of interaction with the biosphere. If, for example, we only focus on blame and redress of grievances, we lose sight of the fact that the root cause of global warming is desire. Too often we lose sight of the fact that we hope to develop a society that includes not only all the people and their interests, but the interests of the non-human components of the environment as well. From bacteria to redwoods, we seek restorative, not retributive justice. In another example, if environmentalism focuses on a problem and solution model alone, we may fix a few things, move the deck chairs around, but recreate similar problems with our new solutions due to our cultural biases. A good example might be the cultivation of biofuel crops on land suitable for human food crops. The large-scale concern remains our energy expenditure and its resultant heat. So a problem and solution model without cultural change drives competition among various interest groups. Who gets to be hot? We humans need to change how we view ourselves. Not all humans, of course. The term Anthropocene makes it seem like climate change is caused by the species and not by capital accumulation and expansion. The developed countries and the emerging markets seeking to be like developed countries need to change their policies. And not all the people in those countries. The problem is not so much how to educate the poor, which is a laudable endeavor, but how to educate the rich and the aspirants to wealth. How shall we educate a person who does not see any facet of their own point of view about the planet as contestable? This talk redefines three underlying mechanisms that inform our attitudes towards surroundings. First, social perspectives on nature. Second, hierarchy. And third, individual cognition. To make the job of changing human points of view more entertaining, I use poetry as the prime example of transformation because while poetry seems to dig deeply into the human psyche, it also tends to resist change. Human activity around the environment is often conditioned by a single myth about nature. Most writing about the biosphere emphasizes one of two polarized and irreconcilable point of views. One is competition, nature red in tooth and claw. The Tennysonian model, developed by colonial powers and absorbed into poetry. On the other end of the spectrum is a kind of number two, natural pietism, that suggests nature is ultimately good and good for you. Don't panic, it's organic. You know the fetish. Rethink it for a minute. We have a strong science around climate change. We can repair most of the damage with existing methods. We can arrest climate change not as a future ideal, but with a little extra cash, do it today. In addition, it will become increasingly cost-effective. China's solar industry has cut costs by 80% in only a few years. Similar cost savings can be achieved in the other primary contributors to climate change: transportation, manufacturing, construction, mining, and agriculture. We also have aggressive political systems to implement solutions. Both totalitarian and democratic governments can achieve results when it's in the interests of leadership to do so. The difficulty lies in convincing people to change. Nobody wants to change their minds, not the rich, not the poor. Our cultures, our will, seem stuck in this tired residue of 19th century imperialism on the one side, the competitive view, and various Taoisms and collectivisms on the other. Polarity attracts denial because neither of the two points of view includes enough of the biosphere, of society, or of individual interest to pressure them to change or to address the emotional storm that the desperate evidence we already have about climate change provokes. Each person and group formation possesses many insights and connections. Based on this range of views, one might draw a matrix of perspectives and interests that reflect our ecosystems as a set of embodied relationships rather than an array of things in a container where conveniently we can throw our unwanted. But we lack the will to change. The culture must support our will to act in an organized and coherent way rather than just act to survive and win. Poetry, for example, provides language constructions and images for our aspiration. Section 2, social structure. As we see in the news, the world is constituted by a competing set of essential views as collapsing around us. To quote British sociologist Michael Thompson, when people argue from different premises, they will in all probability fail to agree. Attention is focused not on the facts of the matter, but on the facts of the disagreement. In other words, the discerning spectator begins by granting legitimacy to all these sets of contradictory premises, nor does the fact that they are contradictory cause him any dismay. On the contrary, he sees social life as a process that depends for its very existence on the perpetual contention between these two different sets of convictions about how the world is. A physicist's view, for example, has resources in abundance since matter is neither created nor destroyed, whereas an ecologist's world has limited resources. And a poet's view, well, poetry protects poetry. The planet does not contain only one or two perspectives. We can build conflicts into our creations, and poets know how to do that already. Canterbury Tales, for example, provides a clear model of contemporary society. In Geoffrey Chaucer's book, The Pilgrims and Their Relationships represent civil society in the 14th century: knights, managers, householders, priests, each with a unique point of view, story, and set of interests concerning their venture. Their humanist identities, as today, are based on their jobs, that is, what they do. They are, however, united by a common purpose. Now imagine an environmentally oriented social structure. As the environmental model of the planet begins to take hold, as a result of climate change, a new set of social classes emerges based on the individual point of view about their surroundings. Let me share a image with you. Thompson hypothesizes these 5 distinct cultural biases, each of which has associated with it a different idea of nature. Each of these 5 social beings links to a part that you might take in your role in society, as your role changes from a worker on the job where you may see nature as a threat, to your projects to conserve nature, to your conflicts as a citizen, supporting regulations about conservation, and then having to live by them. I'm so busy. What shall I do with my candy wrapper? If we view culture not as a set of habits of mind, but as a continually renegotiated ecosystem of social relationships, we can establish a construction of nature that makes sense and sustains our focus while disruptive conditions persist, even between disruptive thoughts. Thompson proposes, and I support this approach for poetry, that the new models, forms, and other prosodic tactics resist the urge to remove conditions such as complexity, goal ambiguity, contradictory certainties, conflict, institutional inertia, and temporal change. All the issues addressed by innovative, experimental, and avant-garde writing. While we cannot make much progress in specialized knowledge without a rigorous taxonomy, we cannot make much progress in our relationships in society or the biosphere without art and science that accommodate both peripheral beliefs, value and fact, where we acknowledge that our positions are contestable. For example, the fact of breath in American poetry is inherent in Olson's projective verse, but not in the New York School or language writing. Differences can be explored with similarities. That fragile edifice of differences that we use to buttress our egos must be reinforced by accepting commonality and interdependence into our repertoire, or it will all collapse around our pages. Environmental change drives social change, and social change drives environmental change. 3, hierarchy. Next, I'd like to add to the social view of nature and the natural view of society another view to help adjust the human self-image, inclusive hierarchies. Normally, we evaluate our status with a hierarchy that starts with ourselves, differentiated from all else in the universe. If we don't distinguish ourselves from the world, of course, we would not be able to exist. Eating, drinking, even breathing would be called into question. Above the individual in this hierarchy are institutions such as the state, and above that, if we choose to go that far, is heaven. Good, better, best. The hierarchy is even a form of grammar. Of course, it makes sense to value the group above the individual, and society has developed complex negotiations to both promote these Orestian ideas and bind them to the group. Specialized knowledge like poetry and biology defend its realm, like an individual defends their body. Defenses of intellectual specialization attack obvious common ground between disciplines of thought, further reflecting the creature dichotomy. My poetry is better than yours. Our poetry is more important to the canon than yours. These evaluative hierarchies, while key to survival, ignore the countless interactions, relationships, and inclusions that are also mandatory for an individual's continued existence. The individual does not thrive alone. The biosphere presents us with an additional tool, inclusive hierarchy, a kind of taxonomy. In an example from physicist Ron Atkin, let's consider a garden. In the garden, we see flowers, shrubs, and ground cover. The flower is not better than the shrub, and the garden is not superior to the flower by virtue of including it. An inclusive hierarchy is easily represented, as you can see in this non-evaluative hierarchy, with gardens and flowers, stems and leaves, creating beauty by cultivating nature at various levels of the hierarchy. Or in another example, at the highest level, you have human genders, and then below that, the different genders, male, female, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transsexual, queer. This is something that we can learn from looking at nature, and in fact, it comes from a biological view of classification that I'm sure we all know about. In this kind of hierarchy, no gender of our species is superior. The species is not better than gender, although it is at a higher level of abstraction. I'm skipping a few pages to stay within the time limit. The great irony of our age appears as soon as humanity grasps the possibility of getting out from under nature's boots, plague and privation. At this very moment, we see the results of our having gone too far. The fundamental question, how do we treat humanity and nature together as a single complex entity rather than as competitive groups? Poetry provides one aspect of the will to change, to push against genotypes toward a commensal relationship with the rest of the planet. 4, external cognition of individuals. Environmentalism can only be effected throughout our culture if we develop a model of cognition to add to the Cartesian metaphor that sequesters valuable proof within the individual. If we develop a notion of external cognition, the individual is no longer conceived as a monadic mental state surrounded by a feeble body. In his article in Environmental Epistemology, Mark Rowlands, professor of philosophy at the University of Miami, redefines cognition as taking place both inside the body and, quote, also in the manipulation and transformation of external information-bearing structures. Several functions take place externally, especially functions of memory, like an external disk array on your computer. In certain circumstances, acting on external structures is a form of information processing. Many organisms exploit external resources in a cognitive way in order to reduce energy consumption and increase survival rates. Rowland cites how a beaver's dam building skills make food more accessible with less effort and less risk. The beaver might have developed longer legs and bigger muscles to run from the pond to the tree to eat its bark before the wolf could catch him. Taking fewer risks and using less energy, the beaver who adapts through manipulation of the ecosystem survives more often than the physically enhanced beaver. Language also represents a demonstration of external cognition. Let's say a reader is looking for a particular book on the shelf. Rather than memorize the location of Beidou's book, The Answer, the reader runs his forefinger across the books, reading the title on each spine in turn until they find the words Beidou. Recognizing the position of the book, the reader wants to take place both inside and outside the mind, creating an environmental link where cognition takes place. The cognitive operations used to acquire points of view about and to represent the world are themselves processes of the world. They possess quite literally material worldly constituents, not just mental ones. Even those organs that are legitimately regarded as located inside the skin of cognizing organisms cannot easily be identified independently of the world. Several organizations, like social organizations like cities and governments, can also exemplify materialized cognition. The fact that we build cities proves the inadequacy of an internal-only model of cognition to account for existing conditions. Rowlands goes on to cite the amusing case of the adolescent sea squirt that develops a brain that allows it to move about collecting food. In an adulthood, totally unlike human beings, to enable reproduction, it affixes itself to a stone and then proceeds to eat its own brain as an energy-saving method when the food passing by becomes insufficient. How often in my life have I applied these things how often in my life have I applied only those things that I already know in order to get a job done and not confused thinking with execution of the task at hand? Establishing a model of self-interest that includes our surroundings extends the idea of environment to the mind itself, not as an abstract impersonal view that we ought to support or a moral imperative that might not be shared by workers in natural resources or heavy industry. If we think of our surroundings and ourselves as composite integrated entities, then we might stop using our environs as trash bins and develop increased respect for other people and our surroundings. I want to thank everyone for spending time listening to me, and I look forward to the next speaker. Thank you very much.